Morgan has owned a bakery in Virginia for a number of years, and for a significant portion of that time, she has been living with something inside that building that she cannot explain and has not been able to make stop. The security cameras she installed to monitor the space have been capturing unexplained activity on a regular basis, and she has been sharing the footage publicly in the hope that someone watching might be able to offer an explanation that has so far eluded everyone who has looked into it, including Morgan herself.
There's always been noises and bumps and ghosts, and again, I'll try to cover all this, but one of the main things, I know that you guys know those spiderweb bowls that you get at Family Dollar, okay? The spiderweb bowls, they look like this. I'll edit it in. Okay, we have a slew of them. We probably have like 8 or 9, just because when Halloween comes around, we'll put cute stuff in it in the cold case, etc., etc. Well, Harry picked up on the Halloween bowls. He loved the Halloween bowls. He loved the Halloween bowls. So, mind you, your first instinct is like, okay, who's screwing with me? And it got to the point to where we knew that nobody was screwing with each other because it would be 2 o'clock in the morning and there'd only be 2 or 3 of us there. We'd all be in the same room and we'd all walk into another room together and it had moved again. Like, we checked the camera footage. We made sure. We saw it levitate. We saw things move. Like, it's nobody's messing with anybody.
The activity that drew her attention first was the spider web-shaped plastic bowls. She kept finding them in places they shouldn't have been, positioned in areas of the bakery where nobody had put them and where they had no logical reason to end up on their own. It was the kind of recurring strangeness that starts as a minor irritation and gradually becomes something harder to dismiss the more consistently it happens, and Morgan began to feel that the bowls were somehow connected to the broader pattern of unexplained events she had been experiencing inside the building. A few days later, one of the bowls was sitting on the customer seating couch. She had thrown them all away. There was no version of events in which that bowl should have been there, and Morgan went straight to the security footage to find out how it had arrived. What the camera had recorded was not a straightforward answer. The footage appears to show the bowl emerging from a painting on the wall of the bakery. Not falling from a shelf above it, not sliding from a nearby surface, but materializing out of the painted image itself in a way that has no physical explanation that Morgan or anyone who has reviewed the footage has been able to produce. She watched it back multiple times and arrived at the same conclusion each time. The bowl came out of the painting. The incident shook her badly, and she began to consider whether getting rid of the bowls had not solved anything, but had instead provoked a response. That whatever was present in that bakery had taken the removal of the objects as something directed at it and had found a way to make its displeasure known. It didn't stop there. Morgan continues to share the footage as it accumulates, still without a definitive explanation for what is happening inside her bakery, and still very much hoping that someone will eventually provide one. If you're enjoying these real security camera mysteries, take a second to subscribe. We upload new unexplained cases every week, and some of the strangest ones are still to come. The man hadn't set up the security camera inside his house because he expected to find anything unusual on it. He had installed it the way most people do, as a precaution, a background measure, something that runs quietly and gives you peace of mind rather than something you expect to be reviewing with any particular urgency. When he came home from work that day and noticed his dogs behaving strangely, the camera became relevant in a way he hadn't anticipated. The dogs were frightened, not the ordinary restlessness of animals who have been alone in a house for several hours and are ready for attention and food, but something more unsettled than that, a genuine fearfulness. Objects inside the house had been moved from the positions he had left them in that morning, shifted in ways that had no obvious explanation given that nobody else had been in the building. He pulled up the security camera footage and started going through it to understand what had happened while he was gone. The footage showed the dogs in the house going about their day in the ordinary way they do when left alone, and then at a certain point their behavior changed completely. Then the cabinet door opened on its own, not slowly drifting in the way a poorly fitted door might drift when air pressure changes in a room. It opened with a purposeful motion, the kind of movement that has something behind it. If you listen carefully to the audio on the recording, a voice can be heard. It is whispering, and what it appears to be saying is a fragmented, halting attempt at a greeting. The man posted the footage to Reddit, and it spread quickly. The combination of the dog's reaction, the cabinet, and the whispered voice proving to be more than most viewers could watch without feeling something shift in their understanding of what had been present in that house while its owner was away at work. Security guards monitoring surveillance cameras are paid to notice things that don't belong, and the team working at a museum in Kazakhstan at around 7:30 in the evening noticed something that none of their training had prepared them for. A figure, white and semi-transparent, moving through the interior of the museum with a slow and deliberate pace that carried the unmistakable suggestion of intention behind it. It was shaped like a person. The proportions were human. The movement was upright and forward-facing, but the quality of it, the translucency of its form, and the way it occupied the space it was moving through, separated it immediately and completely from anything a living person would look like on a security camera feed. They had no explanation for what they were looking at, and the more they watched it, the less confident they became that one was going to present itself. Their conclusion, shared openly when the footage was posted publicly, was that the museum had become haunted, that whatever was moving through those galleries after closing time was not something that belonged to the living world, and that the cameras had captured something real rather than a technical glitch or a trick of light bouncing off the exhibits. The museum's cameras kept running after the figure disappeared. Nothing else appeared that night. Whatever it was, it came, moved through the space at its own pace, and was gone. Security guards couldn't explain what they saw. Some videos spread across the internet because they are entertaining, and there are videos that spread because something about them refuses to let go of the people who watch them. The security camera footage captured near the pool of a private residence falls firmly into the second category, and the reason it continues to circulate long after it first appeared comes down to a single moment that lasts less than a second and generates questions that nobody has been able to answer with any confidence. The recording shows a man and his wife sitting together beside the pool at night, the kind of quiet evening that couples spend outside when the weather is right, and there is no particular reason to be anywhere else. The pool area is lit well enough for the camera to capture both of them clearly, and for the first portion of the footage, everything about the scene is completely unremarkable. Then they heard something, a strange sound, coming from somewhere that the footage doesn't make immediately identifiable. The woman disappeared, not gradually, not in a way that suggests she stood up and moved out of frame in the ordinary sense. She was there, and then she wasn't. The transition between those two states happening at a speed that the camera barely had time to register. The movement, if it can be called that, appeared to go upward rather than sideways or down, as if something above her had reached into the frame and removed her from the scene with a force and a speed that had nothing natural behind it. The man's reaction left no room for interpretation. He was on his feet immediately, moving around the pool area with the frantic energy of someone who has just witnessed something that has no framework in his existing understanding of how the world works, searching for his wife in a space that the camera confirms was empty in every direction he looked. The source of the video has never been confirmed, and the identity of the couple in it and what happened to the woman afterward has never been established through any information that has surfaced publicly. The comments that accumulated beneath every version of the footage that has been shared online coalesced around a conclusion that the upward movement and the speed of the disappearance pointed towards something pulling her away from the ground rather than anything she initiated herself. Whether that conclusion is the right one, or whether the footage has a more grounded explanation that simply hasn't been found yet, is something the video declines to resolve. It shows what it shows, and then it ends, leaving the pool area empty and the questions it raises entirely open. There is a particular kind of fear that belongs specifically to parents. the fear that something is wrong in the space where their children sleep, and that they are the only thing standing between their child and whatever that something is. A woman who began posting videos to her TikTok account found herself living inside that fear, and the footage she shared made it very difficult for the people watching to dismiss what she was describing as imagination or anxiety finding an outlet. She had started to believe her house was haunted, and she had camera footage that she felt supported that belief. The first clips she shared showed something pulling at her daughter's blanket while the child was asleep. Not a gradual shift of fabric that might be attributed to movement during sleep, but a deliberate tugging motion, the kind of purposeful pull that has intention behind it rather than physics. The child was still, the room was quiet, and something was moving the blanket in a way that had no visible cause. It happened more than once, captured by the camera on multiple separate occasions, enough times that the possibility of a one-off coincidence or an easily explained mechanical reason became harder to hold on to with each additional clip. But the blanket footage, unsettling as it was, turned out to be only the beginning. Whatever was present in that house appeared to grow bolder over time, as if the act of being recorded had no deterrent effect whatsoever, and the incremental escalation of the activity was simply following its own timeline, regardless of who was watching. The footage that pushed the situation into genuinely terrifying territory. In the corner of the frame, something appears that stops anyone who watches the footage cold. The woman watched that footage and made a decision. She had been trying to rationalize what the cameras had been capturing, the way people do when the alternative explanation requires accepting something that sits far outside the boundaries of comfortable belief. What was captured in that corner of the footage remains without a definitive explanation, and for a mother watching it back on a screen, the absence of an explanation was answer enough. Some unexplained encounters stay in one room, others become impossible to ignore the moment someone is physically touched. Home security cameras have produced some genuinely strange footage over the years, but there is a particular category of clip that generates a different kind of reaction from everything else. Not the slow unease of a shadow moving through a doorway or a door closing on its own, but something immediate and physical that happens to a real person in real time and gets captured in full view of the lens. The footage of a woman being pulled by her leg while going about her daily routine inside her own home falls into that category, and the debate surrounding it has divided viewers into two camps that show no signs of reaching an agreement. The woman was doing household work when it happened, moving through her home the way people do when the day is ordinary, and the tasks in front of them are familiar and unremarkable. There was nothing about the moment that suggested anything unusual was present, or that the next few seconds were going to be anything other than another few seconds of a quiet day at home. The camera was running, pointed at the space she was moving through, and capturing everything with the kind of indifferent clarity that security cameras produce, regardless of what they happen to be recording. Then something grabbed her by the leg and pulled. The movement was sudden and forceful enough to pull her off balance, the kind of yanking motion that has clear physical force behind it rather than the gradual shift of someone losing their footing or stumbling over something in their path. She went down in a way that spoke to external force rather than accident, and the footage captured it from an angle that made the absence of any visible cause immediately apparent to anyone who watched it. There was nothing around her legs, nothing on the floor that she could have caught her foot on, no other person in the frame, no object moving toward her, no wire or cord, or anything physical that could account for what the camera had just recorded happening to her. The reaction she had in the immediate aftermath of it was the kind of reaction that is very difficult to manufacture convincingly on camera. The disorientation of someone who has just experienced something they cannot immediately explain. The physical and psychological shock of being grabbed by something invisible in a room they considered safe, in a house they moved through every day without thinking about it. The question the footage raises is one that every viewer ends up sitting with in their own way. On one side of the argument, the physical explanation, a muscle spasm, a fall that looks more dramatic on camera than it was in reality, an editing trick applied to otherwise ordinary footage and presented as something it isn't. These are the explanations that the rational mind reaches for first, and they are not unreasonable ones to consider. On the other side is the footage itself, which doesn't cooperate easily with any of them. The direction of the pull, the speed of it, the absence of any physical cause within the frame, and the woman's response in the moments immediately after, all of it points towards something that the available explanations don't fully account for. Whether she was pulled by a ghost, by something else entirely, or by nothing at all that can't be explained with enough scrutiny, the camera recorded what it recorded. And what it recorded is very hard to watch without feeling the ground shift slightly beneath the most comfortable assumptions about what is and isn't possible inside an ordinary home. Certain images and videos spread across social media not because they were designed to go viral, but because what they appear to show is genuinely difficult to explain away. And the more people look at them, the less confident they become in whatever rational explanation they initially reached for. A photograph and a piece of footage that began circulating online after being captured over American skies falls squarely into that category, and the debate it generated has never fully settled. The image started moving through social media platforms with a simple accompanying question: what could it be? It had been captured somewhere over the United States, in the kind of open sky where the absence of surrounding context makes it harder rather than easier to establish scale, distance, and the nature of what you are actually looking at. The image showed something in the sky that didn't correspond to any aircraft, weather phenomenon, or natural formation that people could readily identify, and the ambiguity of it was enough to pull in the kind of sustained attention that most posts never generate. But it was the video captured by a passenger on a commercial flight that took the conversation somewhere considerably more unsettling.
What is that? Carrie, what is that?
I have no idea. Don't move me. Don't move me.
Ladies and gentlemen, compliance with the European emergency brake requirements for hand carry liquid. Bear in mind our attracting customers when following rules apply. Customers traveling from outside the European Union and non-European.
The man had his camera pointed toward the window during the flight, filming the view outside the way passengers sometimes do when the light is interesting or the cloud formations are worth capturing. What his camera picked up on the wing of the aircraft was not a cloud formation. It was a figure, dark, shaped unmistakably like a human being, positioned on the exterior of the plane in a place where no human being could physically be. The wing of a commercial aircraft traveling at cruising altitude is not somewhere a person can stand. The temperature, the wind speed, the altitude, and the fundamental physics of the situation rule it out entirely. And yet the shape on that wing, the way it held itself, the proportions of it, all of it pointed toward the outline of a man standing in a place that should have been empty. The footage spread quickly, pulled along by the kind of collective unease that takes hold when a large number of people watch something and arrive at the same uncomfortable place independently of each other. The reactions it generated ranged across the full spectrum from immediate dismissal, a shadow, a smudge on the window, a trick of light and angle, to something considerably less comfortable, the acknowledgement that whatever the rational explanation might be, the shape on that wing looks like a person standing where no person should be standing. What makes the footage particularly hard to shake is the stillness of the figure. It isn't moving the way debris or a reflection would move. It holds its position on the wing with a consistency that resists the explanations people want to apply to it. And the longer you watch the footage, the less satisfying those explanations become. Sightings of human-shaped figures at altitude, on aircraft, in the sky, in places where the presence of a person is physically impossible, represent one of the stranger corners of unexplained phenomena, and they surface more often than most people realize. Whether this footage belongs in that category or has an explanation that simply hasn't been found yet is a question the sky over America hasn't answered. Whatever appeared outside that aircraft has never been identified. Jennifer had been caring for her elderly mother for some time, sharing the responsibility with her father in the way that families do when someone they love begins to decline, and the weight of that process becomes something everyone in the house carries together. Her mother was seriously ill, and the kind of care she needed was the round-the-clock, attentive kind that reshapes the rhythm of an entire household around the needs of one person. Jennifer and her father had given themselves over to that fully, the way people do when the alternative is unthinkable. Her mother passed away on March 23, 2025. In the days that followed, Jennifer went back through the surveillance camera footage from her mother's room, the way grieving families sometimes do when they are looking for something to hold on to, some final image or moment they might have missed while it was happening. What she found on that footage was not what she had been expecting to find, and it has stayed with her in a way that the ordinary memories of those final days haven't.
Okay.
The elderly woman in the bed raised her hands in response, and her reply was audible on the footage. Okay. A second time, the same voice returned, and this time it said something different. Mama. The old woman's response was the same as before, calm and unhesitating, as if she was answering someone she recognized without any difficulty or confusion. There was nobody else in that room. The surveillance camera confirmed it. Jennifer listened to the recording and recognized the voice. She believed it belonged to her sister, who had passed away in 2017, 8 years before that night. The belief she formed around what the camera had captured was not a vague or uncertain one. She was convinced that her sister had come back in those final days to call their mother toward whatever comes next, and that their mother had heard her clearly and responded without fear. The calm in the old woman's voice as she answered, the way she raised her hands as if reaching towards something or someone above her, the complete absence of confusion or distress, all of it pointed toward an experience that felt, from the outside, less like a woman alone in a dark room in the middle of the night, and more like a reunion of some kind, a conversation between two people who already knew each other well. The detail that is most difficult to sit with is the timing. A few days after the camera captured that exchange in the dark, her mother died. Whether the voice and the death are connected in the way Jennifer believes they are, or whether the timing is a coincidence that grief and love have drawn a line between, is a question that nobody can answer with certainty from the outside. What the camera recorded is there for anyone to listen to, a voice in an empty room, a dying woman raising her hands and saying, "Okay," and a few days later, she was gone. Not every unexplained recording involves voices or movement. Sometimes simply standing still is enough to make a clip unforgettable. Home security cameras are designed to provide reassurance, the comfort of knowing that whatever happens inside your house while you are asleep or away, there will be a record of it. For the owner of this particular home, reviewing that record turned out to be anything but reassuring. The camera was running through the night the way it always does, pointed across the living room in the direction of the sofa, capturing the empty space with the indifferent consistency that security cameras maintain, regardless of what they happen to be recording. Nothing about the room suggested that anything was present. The sofa sat where it always sat. The surrounding furniture was undisturbed, and the stillness that settles over a house in the middle of the night appeared to be exactly what it normally is. Then something became visible behind the sofa. Not a shadow cast by a passing car outside, not the gradual shift of light that comes with clouds moving across a moon. Something with form and presence, positioned in the space behind the sofa in a way that suggested it was occupying that part of the room deliberately rather than drifting through it. The shape carried enough definition to separate it clearly from the background, and the longer it remained visible on the footage, the harder it became to attribute it to any of the explanations that the rational mind reaches for first when confronted with something it would rather not accept. What makes the footage particularly unsettling is the location. Behind the sofa is not a place that generates the kind of movement or light distortion that might account for what the camera picked up. It is simply a corner of a living room in a house where the only people present were asleep, and something was standing in it. If that figure behind the sofa unsettled you, save your judgment for this final case. It may be the most difficult one to explain. It was an ordinary evening for Heather and her family. Her husband, her 2 sons, all of them sitting out on the front porch late at night eating ice cream. The kind of unremarkable domestic moment that doesn't stay in the memory for very long under normal circumstances. This one stayed. While her family sat together talking and enjoying the night air, Heather saw something pass in front of the house that made her blood run cold. A woman, semi-transparent, moving across the front of the property in a way that immediately felt wrong. Heather whispered to her husband and children that the woman scared her, but when she looked at their faces, she realized that none of them were reacting. None of them were looking in the right direction, and none of them appeared to see anything at all. She was the only one watching a figure move past her home in the dark. The woman was dressed in white, and the way Heather described her afterward was specific and consistent. She looked like a nurse in the kind of uniform that would have been worn in the 1950s. And her face was terrifying in a way that Heather struggled to put into words beyond the immediate visceral impact of seeing it. The fact that nobody else on that porch could see what she was seeing made it worse rather than better, because it removed the possibility of shared confirmation and left Heather alone with whatever she had just witnessed. The location adds a layer to all of this that is difficult to dismiss. Heather lives approximately a mile from where a state hospital once stood, one of the most notorious mental institutions in the country by her account, a place with a history that she described in terms that made clear it was not somewhere people remember fondly or visit without a particular kind of weight settling over them.
So a little backstory, I live about a mile from where Byberry State Hospital used to be. This is one of the, I'm pretty sure, the most notorious mental hospital in the country. A lot of abuse went on there. There was lobotomies performed on patients. There was experiments performed on patients. A lot of them lost their lives because they were just treated so horribly. The conditions that that hospital was in was so inhumane, and no human should have ever had to go through what these patients went through. And these people just needed help. It's just very sad. They were so overcrowded. Like the nurse to patient ratio was just extreme. There also was cases of staff that were by the patients. People were dying there and relatives would not be notified. And, you know, back then, like a lot of times people would have issues like autism and things like that. And instead of getting these people help, they would just drop them off up at Byberry and just say, you know, see you later and never see them again. Now, when I was a kid growing up, we used to definitely go in there, and it was really scary. Like, the second you walk on the grounds, you just feel like it's cold, it's not normal, it feels weird. Like, you can tell somebody's watching you.
Lobotomies were performed there. Experiments were conducted on patients. People died inside those walls under conditions that Heather described plainly as inhumane. People who had come looking for help and found something far from it. The building has been abandoned for years, but the grounds around it carry the kind of atmosphere that Heather remembers from childhood, when she and friends would venture onto the property and feel the temperature drop the moment they crossed onto it. The immediate and persistent sense of being watched by something they couldn't locate. There were underground tunnels beneath the hospital that had once been used to transport bodies, and Heather remembers running through them as a child with a flashlight. She remembered one specific moment when she felt something grab her arm in the dark, turned expecting to find a friend, and found that her friend was standing somewhere else entirely. But the detail that transforms this from an unsettling story into something considerably harder to explain came when Heather showed the footage to her father. He had grown up in the same house. When he watched the recording and saw the semi-transparent figure in white moving past the front of the property, he recognized her. A nurse named Linda had lived in the house next door in the 1950s and had died under circumstances that were never fully explained. She had worked at the same mental hospital that sits abandoned a mile down the road. Her father said the figure in the footage looked exactly like Linda. 10 security camera recordings, 10 mysteries that still don't have clear answers, whether they're camera glitches, coincidences, or something far stranger is up to you. Which case stayed with you the most? Let us know below, and we'll see you in the next video.